Football is back this week, and I think that people are sleeping on the start of this new Jim Harbaugh era. And if everything goes correctly for the Bolts this year, there's no reason they can't get to 12 wins.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, because football is back this week. We have a real game, family, trust, respect this weekend, but thank you guys, and make sure you never miss the show by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, we are going to get into our roster predictions, and we also really truly believe that if everything goes right on offense, defense, culture-wise, that the Chargers can achieve a 12-win season. And then part of that is bounce-back candidates, guys on offense and defense that are really going to have to step up in order to make that vision come true. Guys like Joey Bosa, Derwin James, and then some guys that are coming into the fold like Bradley Bozeman and Hayden Hurst.
And the thing is about bounce backs, and the Chargers have a ton of them, right? And if they're going to need pretty much all those guys to be better than they were in 2023 if they want to hit their ceiling, which to me is 12 wins. But this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. David, when looking at this team, it feels like there's a lot of variables and a lot of different ways that this season can go. And a retooling year under Jim Harbaugh, where Joe Hortiz inherited a team that was put in a very bad salary cap situation and had to make it work. And to their credit, they got guys to take pay cuts, massive stars like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa to just straight take pay cuts, and had to make some tough decisions on stars like Keenan Allen. But now the roster is coming to focus. And I think that Joe Hortiz has done a masterful job of continuing to try to improve this team to where a lot of the big question marks that we had, at least to some degree, have been answered. So I don't feel like it's crazy to say at all that this team and their ceiling could be 12 wins in 2024 with Justin Herbert at quarterback and Jim Harbaugh now leading this team.
I completely agree. I think before the season started, there were some glaring and obvious deficiencies that the Chargers had to address. And they were in a pretty deep hole, but they did everything that they had to do to get out of that hole. And systematically, signing after signing, trade after trade, Joe Hortiz was able to amass depth and answer a lot of the big questions, like on the defensive line, backup quarterback, getting more depth in the secondary as well. I think Joe Hortiz truly has done a masterful job arming Jim Harbaugh with all of the necessary ingredients to go out there and let his culture take over.
And not just Jim Harbaugh, getting Jesse Minter the type of players that he needs, giving him a definitive strength in the edge room, getting Greg Roman the type of players that can run a Greg Roman offense, which is a very specific type of skill set and a very specific demeanor in which they play, which is physical, smash mouth football, which is, I think they've gotten a lot closer to that, even if it's maybe not the finished product of the blue collar team they want to be eventually. But for me, for this team to get 12 wins, I do think it's plausible. I don't think it's probable, but I think these things have to really, they have to check every kind of one of these things off the list, which is your stars can't get hurt. And the guys who do get hurt, those players, the depth players that the Chargers have done such a good job of signing, have to be able to kind of mitigate what that separation is between the talent level they had starting and the next guy up, which has been absolutely dreadful over the last decade for the Chargers. Just been so many guys that have had to play that just shouldn't be on the field. And I think the other part of it is the running game has to legitimately be a strength of this team. Jesse Minter has to be who we think he is and find a way to turn this defense around and thrive in taking the football away to really minimize a lot of the weaknesses that this defense can have. And also you have to have the special teams god, Ryan Ficken, doing what he does. And I expect the Chargers to have a very, very good special teams unit. So the offense and defense have to come together. It has to work with Greg Roman. These young, I think this is the other big thing. Justin Herbert has to be able to elevate the skill players around him. A lot of questions with his new skill group, a lot of new faces in this skill group. So it starts right now, at the top with Justin Herbert playing at the level that we know he's capable of and being able to elevate those guys around him.
I agree with all of those things as well. I would also like to add just a balanced offense. I think in years past, we have seen it be way too one-sided for Justin Herbert having to put his cape on and play Superman with no semblance of a running game whatsoever. That running game is so important because Justin Herbert has had to fit the ball into very, very small windows because there's been no respect for the running game at all. So J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Kamani Vidal, all of those guys need to contribute and they need to make an impact. Also, the offensive line, the tight ends, the receivers, everybody's got to be blocking in concert to make sure that this sophisticated running game of Greg Roman's is able to go out there and express itself. Also, just on the defensive side, turnovers, I like to highlight that again. The Chargers have to be much, much better turning the football over and getting it back to the Chargers offense. Also, that, you got to have that physically and mentally tough mentality that has to come into play as well. I mean, if that's the brand of football that you are going to play, you have to make sure that you live, eat, sleep, and breathe that philosophy and go out there and execute it on game day. I mean, all of those things are going to be critically important for the Chargers to be able to reach their potential.
And the other part of that comes with that, David, is with that physical mentality is, and also just not just physically tough, right? Mental toughness. All those things are going to be so important because if you're going to be a good team, you have to be able to win one-score games. And I think for this team to reach their ceiling, it's not just winning close games because that's going to be a huge part of it. It's not charging games away. Obviously, we've talked about that, and I think that'll be much better in 2024. It's beating the teams that you need to beat and not going down to the level of lesser competition.
Take care of business.
The main curses of this team in years past is just playing down to the level of competition they're playing against. I don't think that happens as much under Jim Harbaugh. Play the teams that you need to play and beat those teams, and you're also going to have to pull off a couple of upsets along the way too if you're getting to 12 wins. You're going to have to at least split with the Chiefs. You're going to have to win one of these games against the Bengals and the Ravens and some of these other great teams that are out there. All of those things are built into this, and I think it's possible. Now, looking at what we actually think is going to happen, David, we haven't made a full-blown record prediction for this season yet now that we know the roster is intact. So now that this team has kind of come into picture, what are you putting your money on as far as what you think this team can be?
Yeah, so I like the fact that the Chargers are, knock on wood, mostly healthy going into this season. I mean, all of their stars are hopefully, going to be out there to play. The only person I'm really unsure of is Rashawn Slater because we just don't know the extent of that injury. But everybody else should be ready to go and ready to be at week one. So with that being said, and with the answers that Joe Hortiz has provided through, trades and churning the roster, I feel like, they've done a great job of arming Jim Harbaugh to get his inaugural season off to a good start. I'm going to go 11-6. I've felt like this most of the offseason. I still feel that way. Yeah, some people may say that's a little ambitious. I don't agree. I feel like you have a winning coach to go along with an elite quarterback and hopefully a much, much better and resurgent defense this year.
Yeah, and 11-6 is doable, right? We just talked about it. I think a lot of things will still have to go right for them to do that. A lot of these bounce back players we're going to talk about today are going to have to not only play much better, but be on the field to see it through.
Yeah.
I don't think that's crazy at all. For me, the number 10 has been in my mind this whole time. So maybe it's conservative to some people. Maybe it's, still kind of a biased opinion in some people's minds. To me, with Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh, I think 10 wins is what you should be able to do. I don't think double digits should be out of the question by any means when you have a plus head coach and a plus quarterback and a GM that's put a competitive roster around those guys without jeopardizing the future and has actually set you up better for the future. So I don't think this is the final form, like the compensatory picks and all those things. We're not going to see the effects of that for a couple more years. We're not going to be able to see the development that these coaches are going to be able to bring to this team for a couple of years and see the whole picture of it that way. But I think with what they have right now, with the best depth of any Chargers team I've seen in a decade, I don't think there's anything stopping this team from getting double-digit wins and making the playoffs. I think 10 wins gets you in, and I think the Chargers go 10-7 in 2024, and I think that's a great start to the Jim Harbaugh era, considering the uphill battle that this whole entire regime was facing when they decided to kind of take this undertaking over. So I'm very bullish. I'm so excited to see it but a lot of things have to go right, including a couple of star players being able to bounce back, Joey Bosa and Derwin James, and we absolutely think they can do it. We're going to talk about that and much more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys, if you're going to any sort of event, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's a concert, whether it's a comedy show, if you're not getting your tickets with Game Time, you're doing it wrong, because Game Time gets you killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. And right now, they also have a new thing going on, which is great. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And also, make sure you toggle the all-in pricing so you don't have any surprises at checkout. That's awesome. And check out your seats where you can get a panoramic view of exactly what you're going to be looking at. And you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. I also need to tell you guys that this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. It's one of the things that happens, and it's happening to me right now as I have a baby. And the main thing I want to focus on, especially while trying to grow this show and take this to where our fans all know they can go, is also not letting it stop my goals, not letting her growth stop my growth. So what's something you'd like to learn, whether it's gardening, a new language, or maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling? Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back-to-school era can come at any age. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient and flexible, suited to your schedule. You're also going to save some gas money, that's for sure. And all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. And the great thing about BetterHelp is you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. David, we were talking before the show just about how many bounce back guys the Chargers really need this year, because one of their main kind of ways of really kind of exploiting the market, right? How do you exploit the market? How do you build a good team in a salary cap sport where quarterbacks are going to make a ton of money and you have a bunch of superstars with somewhat bloated contracts that you're trying to work around? The way you do it is by finding value where other teams don't see it. And one of the ways the Chargers have been able to do that is by signing a bunch of players that they're hoping can bounce back. But when you're talking about what this team needs, it starts with the players that they already had and the stars that they have playing up to the contracts that they've already signed. And I think there's no better kind of case study for that than Joey Bosa, because Joey Bosa has been through the gambit, right? He's been the hero. He's been the villain. And over the last couple of years, it's been more of the villain. He has the meltdown against Jacksonville in the infamous playoff game. Can't stay on the field to really show what his true potential could be. And I think it's left a lot of fans jaded, but I also think it left a lot of fans forgetting how good this dude actually is. And when you're talking about bounce back candidates and guys that can absolutely be much better, not only than they were last year, but than they have been over the last couple of seasons, Joey Bosa is at the top of the list for me, because it is still a little hard to fully buy into the health factor of things. But man, seeing how he looked this year in the offseason, knowing what happened in that joint practice that he got hurt on, if he's out there, I think is absolutely in for an incredible season.
Well, speaking of that joint practice, there's a little snippet from Daniel Popper's article about that joint practice here. He said Bosa had a sack and Stafford lost the ball on the play. Bosa also had a pressure leading to a check down and a pressure forcing a throwaway. He added a tackle for loss and a stuff in the running game. And Jesse Minter said after that practice, he's a monster. By all accounts, from every single beat writer that was there, Joey Bosa wrecked that practice. Him and Khalil Mack went crazy, and that's what Joey Bosa is capable of at his peak. He can take over a football game. I think people forget that just a few years ago, he had 8 strip sacks. Yeah. 8 of them. It's just absolutely unreal.
Just like, because he decided it was a thing he wanted to do, too. He's like, you know what? I haven't been doing enough stripping people, and it's just like 8. Okay, leave the league then.
That's exactly right. That's what Joey Bosa is capable of. Yes, the last few years have been a little bit down, all right? He only played part of 9 games last year, 6.5 sacks, 24 pressures. That's basically 2.6 per game. And also had the lowest run defensive grade of his entire career last year. But The problem with Joey obviously has always been the ability to stay on the field, but most of his injuries have had to do with his legs. His legs are not the problem right now. His legs are feeling good. He says he's been able to do all his conditioning, all his weightlifting, all of that's been great. It's been the fact that he broke his hand in that joint practice. Okay. So yeah, he had to have surgery on that. He got it repaired. But if Joey Bosa is on the field, there is no question that he is going to make an impact. That's the only caveat with Joey. Please give me 14 games of Joey Bosa, and I want to see what that stat line looks like, because he is a complete edge defender. And if the Chargers want to achieve the greatness that they can possibly achieve, Joey Bosa has to be a part of it.
I mean, forget greatness, man. Give Justin Herbert an average defense. And for the Chargers to get to where they need to have this team transform and be a team that can win a lot of games with Justin Herbert, you don't need greatness defensively, but you need great players to be out there earning their contract, right? And that's what all the fans want to see from Joey Bosa, and I have no doubt that if he's out there, he can do it. I think the other part of this is finally getting to hopefully see what he can look like across from Khalil Mack for a full season, right? They've only played 14 of a possible 34 games that they could have played together. They've missed 20 games. They've played in 14 together. So Khalil Mack, we know what he brings to the table. They need all those guys out there. And also the thought of just Joey Bosa going out there with the 4 guys they have, not only not needing to play 80 snaps a game and hoping that can kind of mitigate his injury risk, but also just him being able to be out there with potentially him, Bud Dupree, Khalil Mack, and Tui Tuipulotu all out there at the same time. That's very easy to get excited about. But he's got to be out there. And we haven't talked about that. He did announce that he broke his hand. He said he won't be having the club on his hand for very long. All good news. Should be out there. I would be shocked if he's not out there in week 1. But
yeah, he said he was going to play. So
they also need Derwin James out there playing at the all-pro level that he played at as a rookie, and that we've seen intermittently since then when he's been able to be on the field. He's been able to stay healthy over the last couple of years. The big thing is, though, he just hasn't looked the same. And the hard thing is not knowing why that is. Is it because the injuries have piled up and taken a toll on his body? Is it because Brandon Staley was asking him to do way too much? In reality, it's probably a mix of all of those things, but I think the latter of those things was more problematic and also gives you more hope that he can be much better under Jesse Minter. I think a defensive coordinator that is really in tune with what Derwin James does well, plays a defense that's very aggressive that I think plays to Derwin James' strengths. And I'm very bullish, David, on Derwin James being able to go out there this year and having a huge bounce back season.
Yeah, and I mean, least amount of sacks since his rookie season last year, highest reception percentage allowed last year, highest yards per reception last year, and only 1 interception, and also his lowest sack total as well. Derwin James, when he's firing on all cylinders, he is a stat stuffing machine. He's a guy that's going to get your interceptions, rack up a bunch of tackles, get your tackles for loss, get your sacks and interceptions. He can do it all. And I think the one thing that gets me really excited is he's going to be playing in the same defense that Kyle Hamilton basically played in last year and was a gigantic superstar. Yeah. And like, it's a system that really accentuates the strengths of a versatile type of safety. And Derwin James is Kyle Hamilton before Kyle Hamilton was Kyle Hamilton. Okay. So Derwin James has all of that capability. He has that ability to do that. And you're putting him in a system where I think you have a defensive coordinator that understands how to use him. Hopefully, I'm looking for Derwin James to break out, come back, reintroduce himself to the rest of the league as the best safety in the NFL.
And he has that potential. Absolutely, he does. I mean, there's no reason he can't put up a stat line that's 90 plus tackles, which I think he'll have a little less tackles because I think their linebacking core is going to be a lot better this year, right? 90 plus tackles, 5 sacks, and 3 interceptions. Like, it's almost what I expect from him if he's going to be out there healthy all year. I just am that high on what he could be, and I think what the Chargers have done, trading for an Elijah Molden, finding guys who are more competent on the back end to move around when he does need to go do other things is a huge reason to be optimistic about it. And I think the other big part of this is we talked about Brandon Staley asking too much of Derwin James. So hopefully a more simplified role, a role that he understands better, and a role that the rest of the team around him understands better. Just because everything under Brandon Staley was so broken, so compromised, and broken plays were happening left and right. This defense feels much more connected already than the ones we've seen from Brandon Staley. Not trying to be perfect, and I think the thing is, Brandon Staley wanted to be complicated. He wanted to have the perfect game plan, but it seems like with Jesse Minter, It looks complicated, but it's very simple, which is what he told us it was going to be. And if they can actually live up to that, I think there's no reason Derwin James...
Simple for us, complicated for everybody else.
Exactly. And I think that Derwin James is still in his physical prime. I don't think there's any reason he can't return to the guy that we saw, slamming Travis Kelce onto the ground on the goal line and locking him up a lot of times when they went up against him, even though he struggled the last couple of times. I don't think that Derwin James is gone. And I think this team has showed you time and time again that they believe he's still in there and that we're going to see it in 2024. But on the offensive side of things, there's one guy who was a very easy bounce back candidate for me, and it's J.K. Dobbins, because the only thing he has to bounce back from is injuries, because every time that man has been on the field, he has been incredible. So we're going to talk about him and a couple other offensive players the Chargers really need to bounce back if they want to reach their goals in 2024, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I have to tell you guys about PrizePicks, and I'm so glad that PrizePicks is back because they are America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, and PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. You get to pick the projections you want to go up against. All you do, pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And I have even better news for you. Right now, one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you a 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That means you have one of the 2 wins that you need to win already taken care of right there. All you have to do is have Caleb Williams pass for 1 passing yard. So you get that as an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss the deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. They're out. The Bolts are back this weekend, and these are the projections that I like because football is back. You can go with Justin Herbert throwing for more than or less than 232.5 passing yards, which I do think they're going to air it out more than people think in week 1. You can also pair that with Herbert throwing more than or less than an interception, and it's that easy. You hit both those, you can win, and Justin Herbert has taken care of the football better than pretty much any quarterback in NFL history. All you have to do, download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. David, let's get into some guys offensively that we think could absolutely bounce back. And I think to a certain extent, the Chargers need to bounce back with some of these guys that we're talking about playing critical roles in an offense that there are still some questions about because of just the overhaul of player personnel. No Austin Eckler, no Mike Williams, no Keenan Allen, no Gerald Everett. And also a total kind of schematic change too.
Yeah.
Like a drastically different offense they're going to be playing in. But an offense that has had proven success in this league nonetheless. But before we get into that, though, I want to make sure everyone is following throughout the season with the Locked On NFL Fantasy Football podcast so they can make sure that they're not being embarrassed and going viral for having to do some terrible punishment because they got last place in their league and they have to spend the entire offseason getting trash talked from all of their friends because they did so poorly. So to make sure that doesn't happen, go follow and subscribe to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast, wherever you get your podcast from and on YouTube as well. David, for me, the easiest bounce back candidate offensively to choose was J.K. Dobbins because I love what J.K. Dobbins brings to the table, assuming that we're getting pretty close to 100% of what J.K. Dobbins has been when he's at his best, when he's at his healthiest. And that's why I said, hey, to me, this is the easiest one because to me, all it takes for J.K. Dobbins to have a bounce back season is just simply him being on the field.
I think that's 100% accurate. I think with J.K. Dobbins, it's just been very, very unfortunate that he's had several freak major injuries that have taken a lot of time from him early on in his career. But I think a lot of people forget J.K. Dobbins is 25 years old.
Yeah.
He is still very, very young. Okay.
And has only had 234 carries.
That's exactly what I was going to say is that he hasn't really got a lot of mileage on him. Okay.
No.
So his body should be feeling really good. And if you ask him, he is as healthy as he has ever been. And he is got a gigantic boulder on his shoulder.
Oh yeah.
Wanting to prove to everybody that if he's on that field and he's healthy, he will be one of the best running backs in the NFL. And quite frankly, the stats back it up. I mean, this is a guy that is nearly running for 6 yards a clip every single time he touches the ball, he's going for more than half a first down, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I think J.K. Dobbins is the home run hitter in this running back room. He is a guy that can make some people miss and take it the distance from 60, 70, 80 yards out. J.K. Dobbins has that ability. He just has to stay on the football field. If he stays on the field, I think we're going to see a very good version of J.K. Dobbins.
And averaging 5.8 yards per carry for your career is so ridiculous, even if it's a very limited sample size, obviously. And I think Lamar Jackson helps with that as well, because everyone is so afraid of him tucking in and, running himself. That helps. But the thing is Justin Herbert's a more proven thrower of the football than Lamar Jackson is. Even a 2-time MVP, it's just different. Justin Herbert doesn't have anywhere near the athleticism or the escapability, making people miss like Lamar Jackson has. But teams aren't as willing to load the box up against Justin Herbert as they would be against Lamar Jackson when you're so afraid that he's going to run, right? So I think that it helps in different ways. It helps and hurts. But I think absolutely J.K. Dobbins could have a really good season. And when you hear him talk about it, it's like he knows something we don't, right? Like that's just kind of like, it's very tongue-in-cheek. He's like, hey, just wait. And last year, his career average would have landed him second in the NFL of any running back that had at least 100 carries. There was only one running back that averaged more than 5.8 yards per carry last year. For the entire NFL, that's what this dude has averaged for his career. But getting to other guys that need a bounce-back season, and the Chargers need to have a bounce-back season as well, let's talk about Hayden Hurst, a guy that has dealt with a ton of injuries over the last couple of years, was taken in the first-round pick as a receiving option at a tight end, hasn't ever become that true top 10 receiving threat. But when you hear the coaches talk about this dude, and you look at the opportunity he now has in front of him, I think you feel optimistic that he's a dude that could have a much better year than he did in 2023.
Yeah, so with Carolina last year, 18 receptions on 30 targets, only 184 yards and 1 touchdown. Only played around 9 games, but he was also trying to catch passes from a quarterback, a rookie quarterback, that was running for his life and also holding onto the ball way too long, which got him sacked more than any quarterback in the NFL last year. Of course, I'm talking about Bryce Young here with the Carolina Panthers. And so that obviously adversely affected Hayden Hurst's ability. And so now you take Hayden Hurst and you put him with Justin Herbert, who is obviously head and shoulders above anything that Bryce Young has put on the table at this point in his career. And so a much more proven thrower of the football, a guy that can extend plays and throw on the run. And also, you're not going to have the Austin Eckler effect, right? Having the running backs catch a ton of passes. I think the tight ends are going to be more of that outlet receiver. And that means Hayden Hurst getting a ton of those opportunities as what I expect to be the primary pass catcher for this football team.
Well, and the thing is about Hayden, for Hayden Hurst, we like Gerald Everett a lot. Like Hayden Hurst's best season is right up there with any of the seasons that Gerald Everett has ever put together, right? Yeah. It was only a few years ago. He had 56 catches, 571 yards, and 6 touchdowns with the Falcons. And then what happened? They draft Kyle Pitts, right? Then he goes, with the Ravens. They took him in the first round. Then they had Mark Andrews, who turned into an insane tight end. So he's had those kind of things happen to him in his career, which I think all leads to kind of the arrow that, hey, if he has opportunity, maybe he can do something with it. But at the same time, I think the biggest thing in his way is Will Dissly, because Will Dissly could be tight end 1 for this team. I don't know how many 2 tight end sets that they're going to run out there. And the other thing is you can't only have Will Dissly out there for the running plays, because then it's a tell. So you have to have both these guys out there. You can't kind of tip what your hand is as far as what you're trying to do. So Hayden Hurst, if he's tight end 2, how many targets will he get? That's the one thing we don't know, what the opportunity is going to look like. But if he gets it, you have a good feeling that he could do something good with it. But let's talk about the last guy here, David. I think it's so important that the Chargers have bounced back, and it's their center, Bradley Bozeman, the guy they signed to be their starter, a guy that Greg Roman has a ton of experience with in their time in Baltimore together. Not only that, the guy that Bradley Bozeman had his best years of his career with. He needs to bounce back, David. I think he can, but the Chargers really, really need it.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I mean, we've seen in years past how important it is for the center to play high-quality football. With Corey Linsley, it was a completely different offensive line than what it looked like under Will Clapp. I mean, that's just as simple as the fact of the matter is. So for Bradley Bozeman, gave up 8 sacks last year, but that was really an anomaly. I mean, he hadn't given up more than 4 in the previous 5 seasons before that. And so, blocking for Justin Herbert, also going back to a scheme that he understands, knows, and has excelled in, I think are reasons why I am bullish on Bradley Bozeman having a much better year in 2024.
Yeah, and I think the player you would look at was someone like Morgan Fox, right?
Yeah.
Who left and went to, of course, Carolina. They signed him, didn't play well there, went back to Brand Staley, and he had an insane season. He's been, a very good interior
Got
passer
himself a
for
new
the last
contract.
couple of years. Absolutely. With Bradley Bozeman, like you said, 8 sacks was definitely an anomaly, and to kind of prove that even more, from 2020 to 2022 combined, he gave up 7 sacks in 3 seasons and gave up 8 last year, and a big portion of that was because Bryce Young was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL at avoiding pressures, and so many of his pressures, such a high percent of the pressures that came in his face ended up in sacks, that it actually really inflated the numbers in a poor way for Bradley Bozeman. That being said, right, if he can't anchor the middle in pass protection consistently, it's going to be almost impossible to work around offensively.
Yeah.
The quickest way to the quarterback is a straight line. The quickest player that could get to the quarterback is a defensive tackle because he's standing right there. So you have to be able to lock that up. That is going to be huge. And also a center, if you're not playing well, can drag down the others around you too. And it's also on a Trey Pipkins and a Zion Johnson to make sure that all 3 of those guys are working in conjunction to actually make it work and to kind of elevate the play of each of those guys who all have questions next to them. But the big thing is, even though he's been banged up this offseason, he's only missed 3 games in his entire career. Almost every single season, he's played 16-plus games. So I love Bradley Bozeman. I love the signing when it happened. The one thing we haven't said in this, he's already and always has been a very, very good run blocker. He's been a road paver, and that is the part of his game I'm most excited about and why I'm so optimistic that he can have a much better year in 2023. I think anyone who got out of Carolina in this past year is going to have a much better year. Yeah, DJ Chark, another guy, right, who could have been here, could have been on this list as well. But the main thing here is if the Chargers want to reach their goals, they made a lot of bets on players to be much better, and those players have to bounce back. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The exciting thing is tomorrow we're doing our buy or sell show as we always do on Tuesdays, but it's going to be a bold prediction buy or sell show. So call in with your bold prediction, 232-524-7924, and leave us a 30-second voicemail about your bold prediction there, and we will buy or sell it. Or you can hit us up on our Twitter post at LockedOnLAC. Give us what your bold prediction is, and we'll buy or sell it on tomorrow's show. Super excited about that with the season coming up. It's still family, trust, respect. Only a few more days until we get to see it in action, and Jim Harbaugh gets to avenge that loss last year that ended up with Jim Harbaugh getting the job. So we're very excited about it. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for that bold prediction buy or sell show by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find the show on our social media at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also hit up me and David with your bold predictions, me at Dan Talk Sports and him at Dro Talk SD on Twitter, and we'll make sure we get as many onto tomorrow's show as possible. But so excited for this upcoming 2024 season. No reason we can't see this team get double-digit wins and make a playoff run. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for the bold predictions. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.